been single for a few months after my last relationship ended. Living alone again felt strange at first, but after a while, the silence started to weigh on me. To distract myself, I got back on dating apps, swiping mindlessly just to find someone to talk to. That's when I matched with a girl named Vanessa. She was pretty, seemed friendly, and after some chatting, she gave me her number. We texted back and forth for a few days. Nothing deep, just casual conversation. Then one night, she suggested coming over to watch a horror movie. I figured, why not? It was a cold night, perfect for a scary movie and some company. I told her to come by around 9. While waiting, I cleaned up the apartment, lit a candle, and set up the living room with some blankets and dim lighting. Around 9:20, she texted that she was outside. I went to the door and was immediately taken aback when I saw her. She looked a little different than her pictures. Not drastically, but something about her face seemed off. Maybe it was the lighting. She was also taller than I expected, at least 6 feet tall, with a stiff posture and a strong scent of something floral but overwhelming. We sat on the couch, and she sat close, too close. Our legs touched, and her body felt unnaturally cold against mine. I chalked it up to the weather and handed her a glass of wine. We clinked glasses, and she took a long sip, barely blinking as she stared at the TV. Her presence unsettled me. Her breathing was deep and slow, her hands oddly still on her lap. About 20 minutes into the movie, I got up to grab a snack. When I returned, she was gone. The couch was empty. I checked the bathroom, thinking she had excused herself without saying anything, but it was empty. I called her name, but there was no answer. My apartment wasn't big, there weren't many places she could have gone. I grabbed my phone to text her, but before I could, I heard a noise from my bedroom. It was the closet door. It creaked, slowly opening. My breath caught in my throat. My body tensed as I stepped towards the bedroom, my heart hammering in my chest. As I reached the door, the lights flickered and the room fell into an eerie silence. Then from inside the closet, I heard her voice, but it was wrong, distorted. A low whisper. "Why did you invite me here?" My blood ran cold. I hesitated, then yanked open the closet door. Nothing. The closet was empty, but the smell of that floral perfume still lingered, thick and suffocating. I stumbled back, grabbing my phone to call her, but before I could dial, my screen lit up with a notification. A text from Vanessa. "Sorry, I never made it. Something came up. Rain check?" I froze, the blood draining from my face. My fingers trembled as I reread the message. Vanessa was never here. So who the hell was in my apartment? I woke up suddenly, heart pounding. The room was completely dark except for the dim glow of the streetlight bleeding through the curtains. I wasn't sure what had stirred me at first, but then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against glass. My breath hitched. I sat up, trying to shake the drowsiness from my mind. My body felt heavy, sluggish. I reached for my phone, but before I could turn on the flashlight, I noticed something in the dim light, a shape standing in the farthest corner of my bedroom, a figure, still, watching. Panic gripped me, but my body wouldn't move. It was like I was paralyzed, my limbs refusing to respond. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a shaky breath. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, unmoving, featureless in the darkness. Then, in an instant, the silence was shattered. My closet door creaked open, as if pushed from the inside. The figure in the corner remained still, but now something else was there. The feeling of being watched intensified. More eyes, more unseen figures lurking just beyond my vision. Summoning every ounce of willpower, I forced my hand to grab my phone. My fingers fumbled against the screen as I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but when it landed on the corner where the figure had been, it was empty. The closet door was slightly ajar, but there was no one inside. I exhaled sharply, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Maybe it had been a dream, sleep paralysis, but then the tapping returned. Only this time, it was coming from the window. Slowly, hesitantly, I turned my gaze toward the glass. My curtains billowed slightly from a breeze I didn't remember letting in. But the window was closed, locked. Still, just beyond the glass, a pale face hovered, expressionless. The eyes, too dark to reflect light, locked onto mine. I scrambled backward, my back hitting the headboard. The face didn't move. It just stared. And then it opened its mouth. No sound came out, just an abyss of darkness where its tongue and teeth should have been. My body reacted before my mind could, my fingers shaking as I dialed for help. My voice was barely above a whisper, but I begged the operator to send someone, anyone. As I spoke, the face slowly withdrew from the glass, fading into the night. But before it vanished completely, a slow smile curled its lips, a smile too wide, too unnatural. Minutes felt like hours before I heard the sirens. The moment flashing lights painted the walls red and blue, I bolted for the front door, throwing it open to the responding officer. I barely managed to explain what had happened before he began searching the perimeter. That's when he found them. Footprints. Bare, human footprints, circling my house over and over, pressed deep into the fresh snow. But the strangest part, they never led away. Whoever or whatever had been outside was still here. My girlfriend Emily and I had been planning a cozy getaway for months. We found a secluded cabin upstate, buried deep in the woods, perfect for a winter retreat. The pictures showed a warm, rustic interior, complete with a wood-burning fireplace, a big porch with a hot tub, and miles of forest surrounding it. It was exactly what we wanted: peace, quiet, and isolation. The drive up took us about 5 hours. By the time we arrived, the sky had turned an ominous shade of gray, and a heavy snowstorm was beginning to roll in. The Airbnb host, Mark, had assured us everything was ready, and the keys were in a lockbox on the porch. The cabin looked just like the pictures, and a thick layer of fresh snow coated the roof and the surrounding trees. A row of decorative lanterns lined the front steps, giving it a charming holiday feel. As soon as we stepped inside, we were hit with the welcoming scent of pine wood and cinnamon. The fireplace was set up with logs, ready to be lit, and a small Christmas tree stood in the corner with dimly glowing fairy lights. It was perfect. After unloading our bags, I did a quick sweep of the place. It had a main living space, a single bedroom, a small kitchen, and a door that led down to a basement. The basement was dark and cold, mostly used for storage, and honestly, it gave me the creeps. So I shut the door and didn't think much about it. Later that evening, as the snow fell harder, we settled into the hot tub outside. It was completely silent, aside from the wind rustling through the trees. The warmth of the water against the freezing air was pure bliss. That was until we heard something. A noise, soft crunching in the snow. Footsteps. Emily looked at me wide-eyed. I told her it was probably an animal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The sound was deliberate, slow, as if someone was walking around the cabin. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. We listened for another few minutes, but the only sound was the bubbling of the water. We decided to call it a night. Inside, we locked the doors, closed the blinds, and got ready for bed. Just as we were drifting off, a loud, heavy knock echoed through the cabin. 3 slow, deliberate bangs on the front door. Emily grabbed my arm, her breathing ragged. I slowly got out of bed and crept toward the front window, careful not to make a sound. Peeking through a gap in the curtain, I saw nothing. No footprints, no movement, just snow falling beneath the dim porch light. Then, another knock. This time it came from the back door. My heart slammed against my ribs. How? There was no way someone could have moved that fast without leaving tracks. We sat in silence, barely breathing. The knocking stopped. I checked my phone, no service. Emily was gripping my arm so tightly I could feel her nails digging in. I whispered that it was probably some local messing with us, trying to scare tourists. But I didn't believe my own words. Morning finally came, and with it, a thick fog that hung over the snow-covered trees. I went outside to check around the cabin. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Not just fresh ones in the snow, but old ones too, circling the house. They trailed into the woods, disappearing into the fog. Whoever had been out there wasn't just passing by, they had been watching us. Just as I was about to go inside, a voice called out from the tree line. "You folks doing all right?" I spun around. A man stood just beyond the fog, wearing a thick jacket, a beanie pulled over his head. He had an unsettling grin. "I live up the road," he said. "Saw your car, thought I'd stop by." Emily peeked out from the door, clearly uneasy. I forced a polite smile and asked for his name. "Henry," he said, but something in his voice didn't sit right with me. After a few more awkward moments, he turned and walked back toward the trees. I watched as he disappeared into the fog. A deep sense of unease settled over me. Inside, I immediately messaged Mark, asking if he knew a Henry who lived nearby. His response came quick. "There's no Henry around here. I don't know who that is." My stomach dropped. I grabbed Emily's hand and told her to pack up, now. We threw everything into our bags and ran to the car. As I turned the ignition, my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Henry was standing at the edge of the tree line, watching us. I didn't wait. I slammed the car into drive and tore out of there, snow kicking up behind us. I didn't stop until we reached the highway. Later that night, Mark messaged again. He had checked the security cameras around the cabin. There was no footage of Henry ever approaching from the road, but there was footage of him standing in the tree line, watching us, for hours. When I was about 8 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of loud knocking. It wasn't coming from inside the house, it was coming from outside. At first I thought I was dreaming, but as my grogginess faded, I realized the sound was real. I sat up in bed, listening. The knocking was steady, deliberate, and growing louder. I climbed out of bed and tiptoed toward my window. My bedroom was on the second floor, and from there, I had a clear view of the front yard. But when I pulled back my curtain, there was no one at the front door. The knocking stopped. I stared outside, confused, before finally shaking it off as my imagination playing tricks on me. Just as I turned back toward my bed, I heard something new, a creaking sound coming from downstairs. My stomach dropped. My parents' bedroom was at the end of the hall, so if either of them had been up, I would have heard their door open. But it was dead silent, except for that creak. Then another, and another. Someone was walking through the house. I cracked my door open and peered out into the dark hallway. The dim glow of the moonlight coming through the windows downstairs cast eerie shadows along the walls. I could hear soft shuffling steps. My heart pounded in my chest. I took a step out into the hallway, holding my breath. I wanted to believe it was my mom or dad, maybe getting a glass of water, but something felt off. The footsteps were too slow, too careful, like someone trying not to be heard. I crept to the top of the stairs and peeked down. My breath caught in my throat. A figure stood in the middle of the living room, perfectly still. It was tall, wearing what looked like a long coat. The moonlight barely illuminated its form, but I could see enough to know that it wasn't anyone I knew. My instinct was to run back to my room, but just as I turned, the figure moved. It took a step forward, then another, slowly making its way toward the stairs, toward me. My body finally reacted and I bolted back to my room, shutting the door softly behind me and locking it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold onto the doorknob. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. The footsteps had reached the top of the stairs. Then they stopped. Right outside my room. I covered my mouth, trying not to make a sound. A slow, dragging noise scraped against my door, like fingernails gliding down the surface. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that whatever was out there would go away. Minutes passed, maybe longer. The sound finally stopped, and silence filled the house again. I stayed frozen, too afraid to move. Eventually, exhaustion won, and at some point, I must have drifted off. When I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through my window, bathing my room in a warm glow. For a brief moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But then I noticed something. My bedroom door was slightly open. I knew for a fact that I had locked it. I ran to my parents' room and woke them up, telling them everything. My dad immediately checked the house, but nothing was missing. No windows were broken. The front door was still locked. There was no sign of a break-in at all. But then we saw the footprints. Muddy, wet footprints leading from the back door, through the living room, up the stairs, and stopping right in front of my bedroom door. My parents called the police, but there was little they could do. They told us it was possible someone had broken in and then left without taking anything. But I knew that wasn't the case. Whoever or whatever had been in my house that night wasn't there to steal. It was looking for something else, and I had the horrible feeling that it had been watching me long before I ever woke up.